My history with ReBoot goes back to before there was a reboot. I was born in sunny Burnaby, British Columbia, a suburb of Vancouver, and right from the beginning, I was interested in things that had to do with my voice. It started with puppetry. I was a nerd. Got a dummy and then got a custom-made dummy, and I did kids shows. So it was always something to do with my voice. Then I transitioned to filmmaking. And as like a young teen, I started making little animated films, like stop motion. Then I started doing more films and getting into sound and of course using my voice again. And then immediately retired because there was no film business here, which is unbelievable when I drive through Burnaby now and go, oh my God, there are film studios and backlots a mile from where I lived. And I just like, that blows my mind. And then I realized, wait, there is an entertainment adjacent business in Vancouver, and it's commercials and audio for commercials. So there was a company called GGRP. They were well known as a jingle and audio production company. We actually recorded within their facility when we were doing ReBoot. So like it's a real, like everything's connected. So I started banging on their doors and I made my horrible demo tape. And finally they started hiring me. So I really cut my teeth in voiceover in commercials in Vancouver. And then when the animation work started to come to Vancouver in the sort of mid to late 80s, they went to those commercial production companies and went, where are your voice actors? And everything about CG was astronomical. Like, oh, you gotta have like a supercomputer and it's gonna take 8 years. You know, it was just like huge. So when I heard about the lads coming from England with their Dire Straits video under their arm, I went, okay, this is cool. Chris Bruff started to put together this deal, and they're talking about setting up an animation studio here. That was even more interesting to me. When I was a kid making my films, there was only one animation studio in Vancouver. There were other animation studios that were popping up, but again, they were usually supporting the commercial industry. So when an actual animation studio even was considering coming here, that was a big deal for me. I went, ooh, like another reason why I want to know about this. I had recorded tons and tons of animated shows, and because of my history in filmmaking, I went, I can write this stuff. I think I want to write. And I didn't want to completely transition it like, oh, I'm done with voice, I'm going to write stuff. But it was sort of a means to an end because I knew I wanted to create my own shows. So when I heard about this ReBoot show, I got my claws into them early. I sat down and had a meeting with them and said, you know, I should write for this, you know, because I'm a Canadian and I got some credits and So as a result of that meeting, I mean, I knew everything about ReBoot. And, you know, sort of a side point was like, hey, maybe I can get cast in this thing. That'd be good too.
So you didn't end up writing anything?
No, I got shut right out.
We were encouraged strongly, particularly given that we were going to be having Tony Jay, who is like an international actor, top dollar actor for our villain. We were very much encouraged to, you know, if you could pick all the other characters from the local talent pool, please. You know, you can't have all your actors be, you know, global superstars. But, you know, we found a bunch of great people.
After the 1986 Screen Actors Guild strike against the animation houses in Los Angeles, many Los Angeles-based production houses went to Vancouver to find their voices. Because this was my very first gig in Vancouver, I didn't know the voice talent yet. I believe they hired a casting director to do all the initial auditions and get it down to a handful of choices for each of the main characters, which I then listened to with the producers, the creators, everybody who had a say. And then we all together decided who would be the best voices, who sounded like the best actors, who could give us the versatility we needed for other characters. And so this is the series that I got to know many Canadian voice actors whom I then worked with on subsequent series. Ian Corlett and Phil Hayes and Gary Chalk and Michael Benier and Kathleen Barr. Remarkably talented, versatile, wonderful actors.
When you listen to 100 tapes and then you hear a tape that's a good one, you're like, whoa, that one. Put a cross on that one. That was it with Bob and Enzo. We heard a lot of candidates for Bob, but none of them stuck with me to this day. And Michael's read was like that guy. That he's got warmth, he's got humor, you can feel something from that guy.
I think my second job ever was a voice on a cartoon, which they did here, which was Barbie and the Rockers, where I did the voice of Ken, and I got some notoriety from that. And the guy who cast that was a guy named Doug Parker. Doug was friendly with a couple of the young guys who were doing this new thing called computer animation. And I remember him showing me kind of the lookbook or the thing they were going to do. And, you know, we saw all the characters that were going to be cast for the show. And I went into audition and I auditioned for all the characters. I wanted to be Fong and Hack and Slash and all these things. And when I went into the waiting room of Dick and Rogers, there was a promo film playing on the large TV.
Hey, without that pixel shock thing, I would have never have gotten such an upscale place.
And it sounded a lot like me. And for a millisecond, I thought, did I record this and forget recording this? So I said to Doug, is that me? And knowingly it wasn't me. And he goes, yeah, it does sound like you. And I think at that moment, he was like, I think Michael might be the best person to voice this character.
Alpha wing clear of deck. Proceed heading 1138. Stay frosty.
You gotta understand, I was this kid that wanted to do acting and cartoons, and here I am doing a show on ABC Saturday morning that I used to watch as a kid. They were really hyped on ReBoot for that fall. I think it was the fall of '94. And they called us to do, Kathleen and I, to do a recording of the upfront presentation for ABC, so that when the affiliates would go to the ABC upfront, Bob and Dot on TV would present the Saturday morning lineup.
And I am ready to fire up the hard drives and call up the menu for a whole new level of Saturday morning fun. Know what I mean, Dot?
If you don't mind, Bob, let's just take our place backstage and call up the 94-95 Saturday morning file. Don't worry, Jenny. We'll get the job done.
And my character was making jokes with people in the audience. I believe Bob Iger was running ABC Disney at the time, and I made a reference to Bob Iger in the audience.
The name's Bob, and I don't mean Iger. Actually, I was the man Babs had dinner with in February. The papers got it all wrong.
So we went and recorded this, and then they had both of us together sing Conjunction Junction, if you know Schoolhouse Rocks. And as a kid, loved that show, and I knew that one. I said, I know the lyrics, I don't even need this. And that exists somewhere, and if you can get that, that would be amazing, because I've never seen that.
Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses.
I'm not totally in control. My voice is cracking.
Doesn't anyone here know how to reverse a magnetic erasure?
That was in the original audition. One of the lines where the voice cracked, and Andrea Romano, when we did the kind of the read-through of the original thing, she played the reference. She goes, I like that, which is this not completely in control. Partially Michael J. Fox, and also Spider-Man. And that was, I think, the key to Bob, which was an average guy learning that he has these superpowers, as it were, like Spider-Man.
Bob!
I did a lot of toy commercials, that kind of a thing as a kid. But ReBoot was certainly the first series that I did, first lead in a series anyways. So I don't think I grasped the scope of the show, or even kind of understood what computer animated series was going to look like or what it was. I was just excited to be auditioning for a cartoon, you know, because I was 10 or whatever at the time, and yeah, cartoons were it for me. When you do series work, you become kind of like a family, you know what I mean? And it was my first time experiencing that, and I was like the kid in the family, you know what I mean? I was like the only child in the family, and so it was very special for me. I was in school, obviously, when it was airing, and so there was just like a buzz around the school, like, oh, he's in ReBoot, and blah, blah, blah. People would want to talk to me. They'd be saying my catchphrases at school, that kind of a thing.
Major! Alphanumeric! Awesome!
You know, starting to get fan mail, which was like crazy for a 12-year-old, you know what I mean? People from all over the world are wanting me to, you know, send them my signature and things like that. And it was pretty cool.
Well, got a zip. I wouldn't want to be late to hexadecimals on my first delivery.
I think I love you. Bob.
Well, I think she's a woman in menopause, quite frankly, but maybe the young fans don't understand that. Anybody married to somebody in menopause knows that.
Happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad.
Intrigued.
I did a lot of voice work and a lot of theater. I actually do remember the audition. Like I remember seeing the storyboard, and it blew me away. I thought, how am I going to do this? I'd always ask to do the laugh at the end of the shoot. At the end, because that was a killer, to get her range and where she went with it in the...
Then I shall smite you myself, dog.
She's a part of everybody. We all have those emotions. And I think one of the big things is accepting them. She learns the tender side of herself and the angry side, and she's competitive, but she's loving, and she does care. Playing her was absolutely a dive into myself. But you gotta like the old girl. I mean, she was a piece of work.
I don't know if I should talk to you. I'll kill you!
Oh, God, she's ugly when she's mad.
Actors always want to go crazy. I mean, and reining them in is usually the problem. But for Hexadecimal, I think it was like she went crazy and we didn't pull her back. We just went, oh yeah, that's good, Shirley. More of that, please.
A voice you could hear immediately and so iconic. And most people, when they ask me about ReBoot, they say, like with Hexadecimal, like they always remember that character. And that's because of her.
Chaos will always triumph over order. It is the way of things.
Enough!
Masks are powerful. If any of you have masks in your home, try putting them going up your stairs, and you'll look at them one way. Then try putting them up on the wall above you, and they will take on a totally different energy. And it might just freak you right out.
My older brother, Mike, he was always involved in acting and that kind of stuff. I mean, he was doing that kind of thing, I think, in school even. He was dabbling in the on-camera world over here, and it just sort of turned into something that he thought that I'd be good at as well. And so he ended up introducing me to Scott McNeil. Scott heard me working on a microphone. I was working as a DJ at the time. I've been known to be a little bit mischievous and just have fun with jobs and that kind of thing. So I would tell jokes on the mic and do different characters and stuff. And Scott thought that I had some good characters, and he thought that maybe I stood a chance in the voice acting world. And so he got me an audition for, I think it was a Trolls cartoon series that was going on. And the director was Mike Donovan. And at the end of my first audition, Mike Donovan sort of was there, and he's like, Mr. Dobson, why haven't I've never heard your name before? And I go, it's my first audition. He goes, well, Mr. Dobson definitely will not be your last.
I am a renegade, lost in the web.
Just being in that room with some of these big personalities and hearing the talent that you're surrounded by, it was amazing. It was just nice to be surrounded by like-minded silliness. And I mean, obviously it wasn't all silliness. We did manage to get some great work done. We used to have paper fights that were really fun. It would start off with a lone ball of paper, lobbed perfectly over and into someone else's like script or something like that, and all of a sudden it would just escalate very quickly. Next thing you know, it was just like a rabid snowball fight of paper balls. Who would be a good one that would remember those things? Gary. Gary would remember the paper fights and that kind of thing. Oh yeah.
We used to have a lot of snowball fights, paper snowball fights in the studio. Basically, sadly enough, we were just total professionals. We just never had any fun. My first cartoon here was Barbie and the Rockers. Then a whole slew, G.I. Joe and Kissy Fur and Camp Candy and Captain Nintendo, and there was just like tons of them. And then ReBoot came along, so I said, so this would be kind of fun. So I booked the part of, I always get it mixed up, my Hack or my Slash? I think I'm Slash. I'm Slash.
I am proud to announce that I am Hack.
And I am Slash.
He is Slash.
I am Slash.
I
Don't
am
you
Hack.
know us, Mr.
Hack and
Megabyte?
Slash, get it right.
Push the button. I don't want to push the button.
But every time I press a button, something horrible happens.
Because he was big and barrel-chested, he'd have that big and barrel-chested kind of voice. And because he was a bit of a dolt, but he had a heart of gold. I played a few characters in there, like Turbo and Cyrus and Doc Fingers and all that, and had a lot of fun. I was hoping to get the part of Megabyte, but I only did the scratch of Megabyte and the scratch track. But because he had that great, my, what a little delightful little sales sprite you are. So, Bob. I just loved that. I've always loved playing villains because villains always get the best lines. A lot of times, they won't let you improv, but they will let you play with the script. But they gave us that freedom in ReBoot to improv.
Yes, sir, Mom.
Did you say Mum?
Yeah, what?
It is ma'am. Yes, sir. Ma'am, you called her Mum.
A lot of times they would use the improvised stuff because it was pretty funny.
And that was what also made the ensemble record so much more fun, was because actors could actually act. To do those two characters, recording each one individually would have been really hard to make it be funny. You can overlap them later, but when you record them, you need them to be separate and not overlapping. Because the mouth flaps were just blinking lights, they weren't actual mouth charts. You didn't have to actually worry about trying to match. We could overlap, which in animation is typically a no-no. But Hack and Slash, because their characters were so clearly on top of each other and goofing, and that was really a luxury to be able to record these fabulous actors. I mean, I'm sure some of the outtakes are obscene and wonderful of those two guys arguing and fighting and giving each other a hard time. And they were all friends because it was such a small community of voice actors up there at the time that everybody knew each other.
Yeah, I remember my face hurting after sessions just from laughing for 3 hours straight.
We would all sit back and just watch them riff for a little while. Some of the magic that would come that wasn't even on the script when we'd be doing a scene or something like that, and some of the ad-libbing that would fly out and make it to the show sometimes, it was great. Some of the magic there, it's pretty hard to capture that when you're doing remote work.
Mostly all the stuff from that era was done, it's called prelay, because you're laying down the audio prior to animation happening. It's like a radio play, like, you've got your scripts and my line, your line, your line, my line. And everyone's got a microphone. And it's only been in recent years where you're more solo because, well, of course, the pandemic changed all of that. And we all had to work from home.
Being in a little booth with a mic and, it's very impersonal. Yeah, actors are good and they can dig deep, but that's a big hole to dig into, The energy that we as a cast of ReBoot got from one another. You could feed, you could react, you could, and it's then, it's spontaneous, it's now. The gals, Stevie Louise, I just loved her, and Sharon and Kathleen. I mean, they were pretty wonderful people, and they gave. Maybe you've heard of people in film talking about generous actors. A generous actor is one who gives from his or herself, who doesn't expect the limelight, but it's for the benefit of what is happening overall, and or if it will enhance another actor. That's how I would describe the whole cast and crew of ReBoot.
I did a TV series with Gary Chalk. I had done no voice other than, like I said, some radio plays. He told me that there was a character on a show he was on that was growing up, and they were looking for a unique voice, and I should audition. He would see if he could help me audition or get in there, and I was lost. I'd go to Gary's basement, and he would record me on a cassette player and play it back to me and give me lines to read, and I was really shocked at how, I don't want to say awful, but I mean, I had no skill at it, and it's really different than TV and film. When you have a camera here, you know, you can read things from just the way I move my eyebrows or my mouth. You don't have that luxury. It's your voice. They're animating to you, so you have to be able to give, without seeing it, you have to be able to give the audience those expressions through your voice. You have to be more animated, pardon the pun.
What took you?
Traffic's murder out there. Season 3 is my favorite. For me, between 3 and 4, I'm partial to 3. They just had so many great references all the way through. I mean, right down to Corlette's Bill Shatner impersonation.
System, out of danger.
And being able to work with my brother and deleting him at the end.
I'm glad you think this is funny, but if this place goes down, you go with it, and that includes your little witch.
Your problems end now.
That was a memorable episode for me because, I mean, for one, I got Scott there, who was instrumental in getting me going. Mike, my brother, instrumental in getting me going, and the other Mike in the control room, Mike Donovan.
I believe he used to do a radio show in California, which was like a morning zoo kind of thing, and he used to do all the voices. So his audition tape was just this cavalcade of voices, and it's like, well, I'm sure there's 1, 2, maybe 3 characters in there that we can pull from.
Cage the tiger, and you may walk the forest freely.
Madame, I am not amused.
It's bucket or nothing!
Mike the TV is Mike the TV because of Mike Donovan, not because of the design of the character. And it's acting. It's not just voice acting, it's acting. But he brought that character to life.
He's a good actor. He's an actor's director. He liked to pull things out of you organically as opposed to line read you.
Mike is always looking for the perfect take. Not a so-so take, not a good take, but a great take. He's always looking for that and pushing hard for it. He has a lot of patience.
He was great. He gave me a lot of confidence. I learned a lot from just his direction and that kind of thing. He taught me how to, take direction. It was good.
Season 1, Andrea Romano, she came up from the States to direct, and she was great. She liked to go do as many pages as possible. So you'd be going through and you're throwing faders, doing what you're doing, and she would just like to get until somebody messed up. Keep going, keep the energy up, and she'd go, okay, pick up at line, da-da-da-da-da, okay, go, take, bam. You're like, oh, shit. Boom, 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 boom. So, and then Mike Donovan came on after that. Mike liked to work in a different manner, and he wasn't as quick. Where he'd like, you messed up on that line. Can you, let's do it. As opposed to Andrea, she would just mark her script and go, yeah, okay, great. You stay after, you stay after, you stay after. Okay, we're picking up these lines. Rest of you can take off. So different ways. Whereas Mike Donovan was like, not too bad. How about you try it like this or whatever. So Mike would slow it down a bit.
Yeah. Michael Donovan was one of the guys I really looked up to. He was kind of like a mentor to me. He was just amazingly talented, experienced voice actor, and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit, and he just really supported me and really made me feel like part of the team. Michael just taught me to be myself and to just have confidence in who I am as a person, who I am as an actor, and just to kind of go for it, you know, not hold back, because, you know, that he taught me that I had something to offer, and that was important as a kid. You know, I think a lot of the confidence that I have as an actor now stems from those days, and Michael just really kind of like giving me that boost.
He's everybody's favorite appliance, Mike the TV!
Mike! Mike, you know we love you, right?
Working with Long John, man, that was you know, his character. His character was one of my favorites as well.
Nobody'll be collecting a reward on the Crimson Binome.
You know, certain cast members would want to go out and either, you know, just have a break, get some air. Just go out and sit on the hood of the car and, you know, Long John come out and just start talking, like telling us stories about back in jolly old UK and stuff, and you know, his work and meetings with, you know, Elton John, Rod Stewart, and all the like massive names in rock and roll, and just some of the stories that he had were just, I wish I would have had a way of recording them. His way of telling tales, that man could weave a really good yarn, just telling you a story, and then he said, just had everyone just hooked on just listening to him. He was a very engaging fellow.
And Bob?
He's in the web.
The web? He'd be done for.
The whole shooting Bob into the web came about because Michael Benyai, who plays Bob, had told us that he was moving to LA, which a lot of actors do. You try to work with local actors because having an actor down the line is a pain and it can be expensive. Like, we did it with Tony because he was Tony. But then when Phil Hayes left Vancouver to find work in Hollywood, he's like, well, I can still do my part down the line. It's like, no, sorry, you're gone, you know, and we got Scott McNeil to replace him as Hack. And it's the same. Then Michael tells us, who's our hero, he's like, I'm moving to LA. And it's like, oh my God, okay. So, and he kept bugging Ian about, but I can still do it. And Ian, I don't know, was feeling a bit grumpy that night. And he's just like, nope, we're going to shoot you into the web and you're not coming back. And I don't know whether he was serious or whether he was joking or what.
I'd already moved to the States trying to get to the next level, and I would come back to Vancouver and it would air all the time. And whenever I would just change the channels. These are the days when you'd change channels, and I'd hear, I come from the net. And I would change the channel because it's like hearing your voice on an answering machine. I was kind of over it by that point. I didn't want to hear it and live through it. And by that point, I'd been replaced. So I didn't want to enjoy the show that now made me feel bad, like an ex-girlfriend with somebody else.
I was always kind of knocking on the door on ReBoot because I wasn't cast as one of the main guys. I did lots of guest bits and pieces because, you know, you do. And then, you know, you hear the scuttlebutt like, oh, I think they're gonna do more episodes, but Michael's gone. My thing was, that's a great opportunity. It's still an audition process. But I knew they were trying to get someone who more or less was in Michael's range. And we were always kind of like stepping over each other in our careers.
It's not like he was doing an impression of Michael Benyai, but he was doing his Bob, and it worked perfectly for what we wanted. And you know, Ian was already part of the team, what with Beast Wars and all. So, and we knew he was good, and we knew he could do it.
I'm a copy, a backup, and I'm okay. Us copies have got to stick together.
Hey, you're right. What difference does it make? I've always been me.
It happens to every actor. Like, you get fired, you get replaced, it happens. What I liked about the way Mainframe did this is they went, well, old Bob, no longer here. New Bob is a guy that looks different, slightly. I mean, you still know it's Bob. He's had some life lived, and he's going to sound a little different because he came out the other side. So I went, well, that's great. I'm Glitch Bob. I'm not Bob.
2 Bobs? How can this be?
Don't ask us.
And then later, when they did the episode where Glitch Bob meets Bob, we thought this is fantastic because Michael and I are going to, oh, this is neat. Like, and Michael's into it. That's great.
I had not seen season 3, so I don't know what happened in season 3. When I got the call to do season 4, my agent at the time called me and said, hey, ReBoot called, and they want to know if you can record in a couple of weeks. I said, well, I'm going to law school late August in Winnipeg, but didn't they fire me? And she says, I don't know what it is, so, and I said, isn't Ian Corlett the character? And she's like, I don't know. And I thought, oh, they're going to have both Ian and I record the show and then choose who they like better to use. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, this is really interesting, using both of us to do the storyline of My 2 Bobs. I then left for Winnipeg, and I was in law school, and they called me and they said, we want to redo the opening monologue of I Come From the Net to update it. And I said, that's great. I am in law school. And they said, don't worry, we'll record you where you are, in Winnipeg. And I was like, how things have changed.
I come from the net, through systems, networks, and sprites to this place, mainframe.
We grew up watching things like The Jungle Book with George Sanders doing a suave tiger who was gorgeous and very charming and very persuasive and very erudite, but also lethal. And that was what we wanted for Megabyte. We wanted him to be powerful and have this incredible voice and this incredible presence.
Mainframe will burn and Megaframe shall rise out of its ashes.
Everybody else was recorded in studio, but Tony J we had to record remotely. In that era, we were recording over ISDN telephone lines. So we were actually dialing into a studio in Los Angeles, and he'd be there. And we'd be able to, we couldn't see him, but we could talk to him. And he was a good British guy like I am. And we'd be talking just before we were recording, and he'd get into his little English accent, and then we'd start recording, and he'd go into this big voice of his.
Tony J was one of those actors who was blessed with a gorgeous voice, just an absolutely beautiful voice. He has what we call a voice with character, as opposed to actors who do character voices.
I'd met him by chance because we had the same agent in LA at the time. So when I met him, I said, by the way, you play Megabyte, I play Bob on ReBoot. And he's like, oh, yes, yes. He just was like, I'm going to do it 3 times. And he did it, 3 times, smoking a cigarette. And they took what he had.
Yeah. He was an elegant villain. I loved him.
I loved him, yeah. And he was just such a great guy.
And he loved the role.
I loved writing Megabyte for him. Just, didn't we?
God, he was fabulous. The man delivered.
I mean, that is a 1 in a million voice. And we were lucky enough to have him.
Why, thank you. Thank you very much. Please, please, now you're embarrassing me.
My Uncle Tony was my favorite uncle, and I was his favorite niece. And that's kind of actually a joke between us because he was my only uncle and I was his only niece. We used to say that to each other all the time, and we'd send each other emails that said that to my favorite uncle from your favorite niece. I pretty much grew up with my uncle being in all sorts of things, and I never knew when his voice was going to come out of the TV. He was very private about his profession, and he didn't tell us a lot about it, really, which is why sometimes we didn't know when we were going to hear his voice. He was basically in like every sitcom and drama known to man at the time. Like he was in Golden Girls, Who's the Boss, Murphy Brown, Matlock, Twin Peaks. He was in all of them, Star Trek Next Generation. So he was in everything, Night Court. And he became a kind of go-to for a lot of Disney parts. First, some smaller parts, and then, he got to do things like Shere Khan. And then he got his biggest role with Disney, which was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where he played the villain, Judge Claude Frollo, which was basically, he was criticized for being the most realistically evil villain of all time. He was very generous, I would say, and he always made sure that he kept in touch with us. And he always looked after my grandma really well, who was his mom, who lived in Kelowna with us. The thing that I remember most about my uncle is that he had an incredible sense of humor, and his ability to deliver a joke was unreal. He was the only one who could get my brother, my big brother, to basically cry laugh. So I can see why people love to work with him, because he was hilarious and he was always joking around, and it must have been just so fun to work with him. And then to also watch him do what he does so well must have been amazing. Most of his life was dedicated to his work. He wasn't like a hobby guy. He had a family very late in life. I think that he'd want to be remembered for his work, for his stage work early on and his radio work early on and the bigger films and stuff that he was in, and especially his voice work, because I think that that's where he hit his stride. I think he'd really like to be remembered for that and for his bigger roles, like Megabyte.
And they call me a monster.